think how we believe this also makes things better for parents. So basically what we tell you is, parents right now, just tell children certain commands, and it's not like they want to be like dictators or anything, but it's just we live in a culture which encourages parents to explain all the commands to the children, and maybe parents have that very busy people, they're very tired, like there's no need for them to do it.
Again, the culture we live in does not encourage them, they don't have to in the status quo. This means again that when things happen, like for example, when teenagers already become when kids become teenagers, and at the point in which they have hormones and they're more aggressive towards their parents and so on and so forth, the way in which parents approach this is no longer just like a reasonable challenge, but because teenagers by their nature tend to be much more aggressive and much more assertive and much more rebellious, it becomes almost like a personal attack. We live under our side of the house when kids from like the ages of like 6, 7, 8 are already asking those questions. When teenagers, the comparative here is, on their side of the house, when teenagers first ask the question, it's both a personal attack but also a regional attack. So the regional attack doesn't often get conveyed. On our side of the house, the regional attack has always been happening, so the personal attack is far less likely to actually have some sort of effect. But this also means, for example, that even from when kids are very small, that kids are going to have better relationship with their parents because they're more likely to do things like do what the parents do with more commitment and better. Like if your parent literally tells you you have to go to do piano lessons, and you just say, yeah, sure, you might go to piano lessons, but you might not necessarily put all your effort in.
In the rest of the house, when you're forced to explain the things you have to,
you're far more likely to understand why it matters and far more likely to please your parents in that sense. And because we are the ones that most importantly make things better for children, but also for society and for the parents, we're so very proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister for that speech, and I call upon any of the opposition to continue the debate. So here.
Mayor, three main arguments in my speech. First will be about how do we think it will actually be taught and why it would lead to better decision making, both in terms of when to actually disobey your parents and in terms of how to disobey your parents. Secondly, why generally we think in the likely scenario parental authority is used for good rather than for evil, and parents know what is good for the children. And lastly, backlash from parents, why we think they are going to be much stricter and why this is bad according to the entire analysis we got from OG. Before that, few points of external rebuttal, the rest will be integrated. First, a point of a problem that you have with OG is they base a lot of their case by saying, look, we think that in the future it is crucial for kids to have a critical thinking, etc. We are not sure why this critical thinking has to be expressed A, in this age, B, compared to your own parents. We are not sure why your parents don't teach you to be critical compared to other people, etc. Especially when note, in the current situation, you have two main considering that now you only have your teacher to trust under the best case scenario. We think that now the teachers have much more power to actually tell the students what to do, rather than having a control from the parents at home telling them to criticize the teachers as well, right? Secondly, we think that we are not so clear as to why the problem they describe is so existent in the status quo. No, because we give in a POI, mostly we think that a lot of kids are rebelliousness in their own nature. Side. But secondly, we think that generally we are not sure why the things that parents teach to their children are bad, and this is the most important thing that is lacking from the PM speech. So even if we accept that the children are not critical enough for their parents, we are not sure what is the actual damage for this if parents usually love their kids and have experienced more than their kids and want them to do good. Let's get to the points first. Let's discuss how we think it will be taught and why it will be taught poorly and may lead to bad decision making. So generally, obviously this debate is going to have both teams are going to talk about some cases are good, some cases are bad. Sometimes parents are right, sometimes parents are wrong. And obviously some cases you want to listen to your parents, and some cases you don't. What do you think is the general criteria for when it is actually right to disobey your parents? We think that generally, it is true in cases where your parents don't know or are lacking in experience that is specific to your time. That is, sometimes things that are specific to technology and then being too paranoid about it. Sometimes maybe things that they lived in a more conservative era and are not so clear about your LGBT identity and things like that. We think that these are the things where it is appropriate to actually disobey your your parents. We think that in most general cases, since parents do have more experience than you, that is relevant to your own lifetime because they've grown in your own neighborhood, in your own area, and have more years of living, and because they love you, we think that mostly they will make the right decision. Why we think that, however, the way that students will learn it at school will be on the bad cases. We think few things are crucial. First, we think that teachers generally have the same experience as parents, just less specific to their own child, right? We think that teachers generally are of the same age group as the parents, therefore live in the same time. We think that generally most of the teachers are parents themselves. They're also often conservatives. They are probably not going to be very liking of this motion in itself, right? Most teachers are not going to like it even if they are going to do it, right? They are going to teach it in the most vanilla way possible and are going to discuss definitely in which teachers actually agree with the parents. Secondly, we think that specifically the fact that teachers must avoid speaking about about the things that cause the most outrage, right? Like things such as sexuality, such as drugs, etc. They are going to only talk on the things that are in which they are likely to actually agree with the parents, right? Things such as like actually talking about how you should work hard at school, etc. And you think that vaguely they can say things such as you should do what you love, etc. They can never say specifics because obviously it will lead to outrage of parents, and secondly because we think that in most cases they are likely to agree. Why is this crucial? Because we think that children have to believe, like I can do everything, my parent is wrong, and my parent is stupid, and they're never going to hear about the cases in which the parents are right, because most of them are cases that are actually likely to create outrage, meaning that it is likely that they are going to get reinforcements for all of the issues, and are going to get a blanket ban sort of thinking I am always right, and they are likely to be susceptible to this message due to their rebelliousness. But secondly, about the how, we think that generally, because they're going to go past the tipping point of them being generally rebellious, we think the point at which they are likely to be more aggressive, less actually listening to their own parents' point of view, especially when now the way better decision for the kids than rather the teacher, right? We think that generally parents, because they love the children and they know them for many years, they probably know what they like. They probably are not likely to push them towards subjects in school that they know that vision is crucial. Note, when we talk especially about the young ages where children have literally no experience, when you talk about 10-year-olds, etc., I think that this is the point at which listening to your parents is crucial, and actually being more critical towards them is the point at which you might do something that is literally dangerous for you. And we think that this obviously also escalates towards later on in life. Note, when we get nearly no impact from OG about which are the cases in which parents actually make damage to you, we think that the incidents in which parents actually save you from yourself, from doing dangerous drugs, from getting into toxic relationships, we think that these are the cases that are most crucial in this debate and are the highest impact. But before I move on, closing and extension?
Yeah, so in the status quo, teachers talk about things that are often difficult to talk about and not very specific, such as sex education and drug and alcohol education. These things can happen on both sides of the house.
Not in generally most countries and most schools in the world, not even in most schools in the US, because of the outrage it usually causes. In so far as this is the case, we think that generally still talking about these things with your own parents is still preferable, giving their own because they know that the children are now going to have someone questioning their authority in school. Parents generally want to be able to still have the education over the children, because generally we think that now parents are also actively going to tell the kids to question their teachers more now that they know that the teachers are likely to go against them, right? We think that this means that on the cases that actually children are likely to the cases in which children will accept this and will be more questioning of their parents, and they are going to be much more disobedient of their parents, and the parents will see it as a reinforcement of the school changed my kids against me, meaning at this point the parent is going to be much stricter. But secondly, in many cases they are going to lose, children will not listen to the teachers, and in these cases they are going to lose also the teacher's authority and lose their actually control to the parents and lose their ability to actually focus more in school. Beg you to oppose.
I think the leader of the opposition to that speech now call upon the DPM to continue the debate today.
two broad areas in this speech. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about how it improves the parent-child relations, clashing with what they try to tell you. Secondly, I'm going to explain why it's going to lead to children being better citizens in the future and having more successful lives in general. But the first thing I want to do is to want to clarify to opening opposition what being skeptical means, because I think a lot of that impact actually stems from like a disinterpretation of what that word actually is. What Raf told you very, very clearly in Prime Minister, and they clearly didn't listen, is that what skepticism means is not necessarily disobedience. I'm going to explain why it's not the case. We told you what the school is going to say is not you should disagree with your parent and you should fight them on every decision they make and try to tell them that they're always wrong. It's not the case. What you try to say is, look, your parent should be willing to provide you justification for every decision they make. You should be able to ask your parents questions when they are telling you something so they can explain why they are making that decision instead of just like asserting that this should be as they say, right? What this means is that like the kids are not necessarily going to be fighting with their parents. This means that like what's actually going to happen is you're going to get an explanation from your parents' perspective. It's not like they try to say, oh, but like now you will hear about what your parents want from your teachers and from your parents. Exact opposite. You will hear no thank you. You will hear exactly what your parents think and why they will justify why they're making you do what they are making you do, right? This probably won't lead to disobedience. For a simple reason, because once parents give the justification, and presumably, if they are right and parents are clever, they will probably give a justification that is also reasonably clever. I suspect that kids that are 10 years old are not particularly good debaters, so they will just have to be like, that makes sense, and they will do it. They will probably do it even better, because now they understand why they have to take that particular class, instead of just being told that you have to do it for reasons their parents make, right? The second thing is that the bizarre thing that they try to say, all teachers are conservative, or they respect family values and don't want to do it. I think that the motion kind of like assumes that the schools are able to like do how it improves parent-child relations. Why do you actually have them better? From the house, children can get quite angry with their parents if they feel that parents were imposing their specific opinions on them for their whole life, right? We tell you that we're able to actually prevent that sort of We tell you that it's not something it is that hard to make these parents do. We tell you that what parents currently do is that they understand that they have some sort of experience. They may be tired. They might see the child as someone who's clearly stupid. So they do not feel like they have to explain anything because it's time saving not to do it. We think it's incredibly damaging, and we are going to change it. We don't think the parents are going to rebel against that so much. They will just have to bite it and try to explain to their kids things a little bit more. We think that's doable. We tell you that given that everything your parents do is done for a reason, and you now know that it's being done for a reason, you trust parents significantly more. That means you're less likely to rebel against them because you see that they have the best interests of your heart. And if they can't explain, they probably shouldn't be doing it, right? So parents should have justification for things that's clear. Also, right, you are likely to do things better and succeed in these things better, right? Because parents are more likely to listen to reasoning of their kid, for instance, why they don't want to take that piano class, right? Often parents do force kids to take certain classes because they're projecting their own unsuccess in the past, right? They wanted to be a piano virtuoso. Actually dream about this other thing, they are significantly more likely to make a decision that is beneficial for the kid. And if they actually explain to the kid why piano is helpful, the kid is more likely to learn the piano properly instead of just sitting there and being angry at the world. Cool. Next, what do we think the broader societal impacts are? Before that, closing, do you have something? No, cool. No, thank you. Right, we think that this sort of culture leads to bad habits in general when it comes to questioning and having critical thinking. To how to think about things that you are being taught at school. They do not really try to counter the fact that critical thinking is usually being critical thinking is not being applied when it comes to questioning your parents, because your parents are there for 6 years of your life. There's a massive authority that you shouldn't be questioning, that there's someone who can just say, this is what it is, and you will have to listen to it, right? We think it's something that's that balancing, that sort of massive socialization that happened in the early, yes, please.
Debate is about probabilities, not possibilities. Teachers can possibly teach it with nuance. We showed you why they are not likely to.
Okay, so I think that if we tell the teacher to simply explain, you should be able to ask your parent message. Like, I don't think that that's the way you should be debating against this motion. Cool. What do we think is the impact of the fact that like the dialogue exists and the child doesn't anymore have a clear authority that like just can tell you that things are as they are and they should never be questioned? Recognize that many things that exist in the society are being presented to people in a very similar way as parents accept it. Recognize that a large amount of like societal norms are not particularly being explained why they are as they are. The fact is like we just assume that this is how it's supposed to be because that's how it's always been, right? To have a dialogue with your parent over things that they tell you they are as they are. Of exactly why like some things are important or some things should be done. We think that like this can help a lot of kids like, being able to question what their faith voting for and like what are the kind of like underlying underlying like opinions that you might have because of that, and you are much more likely to be someone who's going to act in their best interest in the future. For all those reasons, because it helps the parents, it helps the kids, we are very proud to propose.
Great, so I thank the GPM for that speech. Now call upon DLO here.
A lot of our analysis wasn't actually answered. I'm going to flag exactly where I'm going to flag why is that important. I'm going to answer their points, and also I'm going to add justification and why it's simply wrong to teach this material, and also explain specifically why, especially according to Adar's material, which we explained that now the teachers have significantly more power over their children, which was completely ignored. But first of all, let me just answer quickly that, oh, we want critical thinking in general. First of all, we still to this point don't understand why can't a teacher teach? Look, we want you to critic things that aren't just your school, such as society, such as what friends tell you, such as that. Specifically, don't also then critic their parents. I don't understand why it has to be taught at the age of 10 or 9 in order for you to just generally then critic society. Still, those are rebuttals Hadar gave you that didn't really answer them. Then let's talk about the way it's taught, because schools will teach it and teachers will teach it. What we said in one reason was because teachers are much less likely to believe in that message, because they're parents themselves, because they really don't believe that kids should have the authority, because the parents from the class are pushing in parents meeting not to teach it that way and stuff like that. Why they're unlikely to teach it in a nuanced way? Why they're unlikely to stress it? But we gave you or also 3 other reasons which were completely ignored, right? The fact that teachers' associations have incredible power inside the education system, which give them a lot of power to shape how the message would look like and why it would be incredibly unnuanced and incredibly vanilla. Third of all, we talked a lot about probably not going to be in my report card, which means naturally kids simply really do not care. But moreover, we simply explain the way classes actually look like. It's hot today. I'm bored. My friend is talking to me from behind. I want to play on my phone. I'm losing my attention every 5 or 10 minutes, and that's why I'm very unlikely to get any nuanced message, especially on things that I really don't have to study for because there is no big test. All of that was really unanswered. We think that already mitigates a lot their ability to teach that message, because we think it's really not that easy to teach a kid exactly how to be skeptical to his parents, exactly how to react when the parents give me an explanation that I disagree with, exactly how to react to situations in which my parents gave me a rule and now I don't want to follow it. Should I follow it or not? And the parent is not right next to me to give me justifications. About what happens, because we get the only rebuttal to the part of, look, parents will give actually really good advice, you should really listen to them, especially if you're a silly 10-year-old, right? To that they say, oh, but it's not disobedience, the parent will always give you justification. What they miss is the overwhelming majority of time that it's not the case that we're talking a lot more about things like parents give you general rules in life. Hey kid, please don't drink. Please don't do anything dangerous. Don't play with knives. Don't go with these friends. Don't go to that neighborhood. Don't go on the bus alone. The problem is, the majority of time, especially general rules they give to you for you to listen to them. They need that instinct, especially when, please note, you oftentimes have societal pressures, such as your friends, such as you want to seem popular, such as you want to impress a girl, such as society telling you, hey, this is a cool thing to do. These are and you have active pressure to do these stupid things. When you question these things and when they teach you not to take them for granted, not to have that basic instinct to just listen and don't do that stupid thing, and when people around you, hey, it's not that dangerous, hey, it sounds like a good idea, hey, it would be cool, that's the point at which you're likely to do really stupid things. This is really important, right? And especially when we give you analysis of why it's incredibly likely that the majority of decisions will be that, especially when we give to you that the message is unlikely to be nuanced, therefore it's more likely to be on the simple rules and not more complex things such as the general dialogue or the more advanced messages such as no. They misunderstand why teenagers are so rebellious. Teenagers actively want to disassociate themselves from their parents. They actively want to do different things, create an independent identity. That's why they're specifically not only skeptical, but rebellious. They actively want to go against their parents to show that they're independent. OG in a second. Then we give you a lot of analysis on backlash. Why it's incredibly likely for when a parent comes home after a long day of work and he sees that the child did again something that annoys him and the brother is screaming from the other room and I'm tired and I don't have the time to explain to you why this thing is right. Please just listen to me. I'm tired of this. And when you and you question my authority and I feel like it's disrespect and I feel like I'm tired of explaining to you, why they're incredibly likely to simply be more strict, to simply explain, I don't allow dialogue here. Sex education. Okay, first of all, first of all, I think I gave you many more explanations for why that's unique. Second of all, sex education is taught terribly in the majority of places. It's a really bad example. Let's continue. Then they say, oh, but I need a parent to generally explain. And this is the point where I literally don't understand the delta, right? Majority of parents, when I give you a general rule, right, they'll say, look, I don't want you to play with knives because this is dangerous. You can get hurt. Especially when, if an explanation is unclear to a child, he's likely to simply ask, hey, why is that true? Why? Can I just understand why? It's unclear to me why the simple explanation for why I give a certain rule, why the likely scenario is me saying, look, I don't want you to do X and that's it, I'll never explain anything more in the future. And when they say, lastly, when they say things like, oh, but now he won't go to piano lessons because he wants to, it's incredibly likely for a child to express he's unhappy in piano lesson, and therefore a parent to explain to him why it's important for him to go to piano lesson, and he should go. For all these reasons, I beg you to oppose.
I think the dialogue and call upon the member of Gov here.
Did anyone forget? No. Yeah, of course.
Is actually feasible. I think what we're going to bring you in CG is exactly why we get better welfare and better outcomes for our children in this policy for a few specific reasons while addressing their materials and how we're going to do this policy well. So first I'm going to bring you why schools are specifically the best actor to carry out this policy. I'm going to talk to you about why parents, when they are the exclusive influence on a child's view of authority and stuff like that, are bad actors, and then I'm going to talk about plausibility. We're going to extend on our opening to provide additional and more important reasons as to why, beyond parents being the largest influence, which I think broadly happens on both sides of the house due to you spending a lot of time with them, et cetera, et cetera. Other reasons as to why they can be actually a bad output or bad income. Bad influence on a child's life. Okay, so why are schools specifically the best actor? Because I think that's something that needs to be addressed, right? So we think one, they're run by the state or other chosen, right? So we good outcomes for all the people within their system. Two, this is a policy, right? We think that this is a thing because it's carried out by the state. There's a curriculum that is developed by this. Two, we think that schools are highly accountable. First of all, teachers, in order to be in the education system, have to be highly trained in a lot of ways, spend a lot of time interacting with children, and also, and have a lot of education having to do with that. Also, children are seen as some of the most vulnerable actors in our society, universally. That means that when teachers are doing bad things to children, they're likely taken out of the system very quickly, because almost universally, people care a lot about kids. That means that there is a huge amount of scrutiny on teachers and education officials to you probably have two parents or one parent, right? We think that even from the youngest age, children are interacting with a lot of different adults, meaning that even if there is one bad teacher, one person that might be teaching things that aren't necessarily right, which we've given reasons why they probably aren't true, feasibility thing. So I think that especially when they're at the youngest age, when they have the most power to in turn information about things and the ideas about the world, we also think that they often fear authority a lot, right? Like, if you're a kid in school, there's a lot of bad repercussions about not listening to your teacher and not paying attention in school, even if it isn't directly attached to your grade point average or something like that. If you're 7, getting recess taken away from you is probably a really bad thing and a mechanism that a teacher can use to influence these sort of ideas. Why are teachers going to do this well? One, we think they interact with a lot of different types of kids, meaning they're more accepting to a broad range of experiences and ideas. That means if you're a child who is different from your parents in terms of your gender identity, your political ideas about the world, or you even might just be a little bit different personality-wise or a different representative, because a teacher has run into a lot of different types of children, they're more likely to be accepting of this idea. We also think they have a huge incentive to teach kids to be nice, right? So we think that because of this, because they have to interact with them at a time, they have to interact with a lot of them at a time. So if you're teaching kids to be really, really super troublesome and rebellious, that's we think what's ignored by opening government is they're really responsible actors. Your teachers are never going to tell you to get into an abusive relationship or start doing drugs. They are just like people who really have invested in kids and love them a lot, and we think that they're going to do this well for that reason. No thank you. We think, again, in response to the material that they brought us, a lot of the stuff that they want to talk about are done on both sides of the house. The material about being yourself and like doing things that are just like good and going against the flow. However, if your parents are the #1 authority in your life, this information doesn't cement, right? We think if you're being constantly told by an authority figure that you shouldn't be yourself or that you shouldn't do different things, we think that that information isn't useful. We only get the good outcomes that they want on their side of the house if we have a mechanism to tell kids that they can disrespect the power of authority in some cases. Okay, why are parents toxic, or why are parents sometimes toxic or difficult beyond the reasons that we got from opening? One, it's not always their choice to be parents and they have no training, meaning that they can make a lot of mistakes without even needing to, which can directly harm their kids. They have also no escape. They are always expected to be parents versus where teachers get paid and also get off at the end of the day. This is really helpful because it's often really, really stressful to be a parent, meaning they can lash out at their children even if they have the best they want the best for their kids, which can be really terrible for a kid if you're a really young child and don't understand necessarily what this means. Because you have an investment of time and energy in your child, and so you're really, really, really focused on their success, and it's really hard to let go of them because where you have a high amount of involvement and prescription in your child's life and what they do with their free time, which can be really bad if one, you're a child who maybe isn't that high pressure and your parent wants you to keep achieving and achieving and achieving, but also if you're a little bit different, if you just want to do things that aren't the same. Two, we think it amounts to putting huge amounts of pressure on your child at all times, right? And we think a lot of the things we're bringing you aren't contradictory because parents are a diverse group of people. They're not always going to act the same. No, thank you. We also think that it leads to parents not telling children when they're acting out. And so you don't get a lot of, like, an important thing is teachers being a check on children, being like, sorry, you're not God's gift to the Okay, what are the impacts of this? So we think the broad societal impacts we get from top half are probably a wash because the metric of this debate is child welfare. You're not going to get a ton of good societal impacts because you're probably getting influences from a lot of different places. So we think it largely has to do with how they prescribe ideas around success and acceptability. So we think this has to do with like your child's behavior as well as social norms and cultural beliefs, which are often very similar for parents. We think this is bad because children often grow up in a different generation than their parents are always. Between parents and children, which is a worse quality of life for your child because they can't do what they want in a lot of cases, even if it is okay or legitimate, but they also have a lot of guilt despite this difference. When you take away this tension within the child welfare and better outcomes for parent-child relationships. So proud to propose.
I thank the member of government for that speech. Now call upon the member of opposition to continue the debate today. Here.
So I don't think children are necessarily going to become Socrates. I also don't think they're necessarily going to become like uncontrollable hot messes, right? What I'm going to explain in this debate is why even if this policy is done at its best, and we buy the analysis coming from the entire government bench that schools can do this well, that they will bring this policy in a way that is good for, or not good for the child, but that does have reasonable like effects, why, even if it's somewhere in the middle where you aren't Socrates but also aren't completely an uncontrollable mess, the effects on the side of your value system are so marginal, and the effects on the side of your social skills, of your emotional intelligence, of your discipline, and of other things that are incredibly important is so much bigger. I'm going to do that in my speech, but first a little bit of rebuttal. So we think that we get from starting with closing government is they say, well, you have bad parents, you have controlling parents, you have overbearing parents. I think that in this debate, those are the parents and the children that are least likely to be affected by this policy, right? I think that if you come from a home where your parents are incredibly controlling, where your parents don't let you watch, for example, certain programs on TV, they control the kind of media you consume, they control the kind of friends that you see, it is incredibly hard to push back against that, right? Even if your school tells you you should just say no, if you live with a controlling parent, it is unfathomably hard to say no to your parents, right? Even if your school is telling you to do so. I don't think that the kind of parents that they are talking about, the most extreme cases, right, are the ones that are actually going to be helped or solved by this policy. They also say school is a good place because you interact with multiple influences, you have teachers that care about you, you have teachers that teach you stuff. This is status quo, right? I really don't understand why school can't already be an environment where you interact with multiple people, multiple influences, and multiple opinions, which we have in the status quo, right? I don't see why necessarily telling children to be bad to their parents changes that in any single way. On to OG. They say, look, critical thinking needs to be taught in all fields. I think that was already done to a great extent, but also to a much more effective extent, right? I think that a much more effective way to teach your children critical thinking is simply exposing them to a huge amount of opinions, especially if the kind of effects that you want to have are mainly, for example, on their value system, on the kind of norms that they question, etc., right? I don't think the way to do this is to tell children to ask questions to their parents, but simply to say, here are like a huge amount of options that you could also consider. Let's analyze them and talk about why they're important. I think that any kind of like school is kind of a zero-sum game, right? So any kind of time that we spend on teaching children not to question authority is time we could have spent on exposing them to other opinions. The second thing they say is, look, you just simply need to ask for a rational reason, and that is always going to be a benefit on our side of the house. The problem is that children often don't understand what a rational reason is. If I tell a child, eat broccoli because then you'll be healthy, a child is like, why should I care that I'm healthy? And you're like, well, so that later you don't have problems like with your liver, and they're like, what is a liver? And you're like, well, it's a thing in your body. It's kind of hard to explain to children why these choices are rational or why they need to spend time on long-term thinking. If you say study well so you can get high grades, they say, why do I need high grades? So you can get into a good college. What is college? Why should I get into a good college? You have to start this whole conversation, but not only is that conversation, no. That conversation might seem like a good thing, but first of all, I think that already happens in the status quo. But second of all, I also think that children can't necessarily conceptualize what that means in the long term, right? This is exactly why parents need to have a fiat in decision making, even when the child doesn't understand. Because I think most cases, parents aren't stupid, right? They want to explain to their child why they need to get good grades. They want to explain to their child why they need to have broccoli. In the cases where the child still doesn't understand why they need to do that because they simply have no concept of that thing, that is when parents need to have the fiat to tell their children, just listen to what I say, I know it is in your best interest, right? We say those are the cases that are important. So why are these things likely to have limited effect on a value system? We say, first of all, you have a lot of other influences that decide what your value system and what the kind of norms that you think are good are, right? For example, the media you consume, the community you grow up in, but also the friends that you have and the people that you speak with. If your parents never let you watch, for example, High School Musical when you grew up, you're never going to get in contact with those influences, no matter how much you want to question your parents' authority, right? We say those kind of things are much more important to deciding what children find important or find good than that. Second of all, it's often subconscious or habitual, right? For example, since before you were you going to school, you went to church every Sunday, right? Those are the kind of things that children grow up thinking is normal and don't necessarily question because it is not a direct command, right? But also hearing your parents talk, for example, when they're watching TV. Those aren't things that you question, you simply hear them, they're influences that come into you and you don't necessarily question. But also we say that especially the situations where there is a direct command, those are the kind of situations that often have to do with social skills, with learning, with discipline, right? Which I'm going to explain in a second. But third of all, we say children often hear what they want to hear, right? It's very hard to give a nuanced message to a child. You need to listen to your parents, but not completely. You have to question this, but not that. We say children often are kind of a filter where they hear, you should question your parents, and decide to use that as sort of a way to legitimize themselves into doing that. Okay. On to the social skills. Why is it so I'm going to specifically tell you what kind of skills parents actually do often, or actually almost always, teach their children, and why those are the most likely ones to suffer. There are things like social skills, discipline, healthy habits, and emotional intelligence. Why are these things likely to be affected? Because we say these are often the things that follow from a specific command, right? eat your broccoli, go to piano lessons, do your homework. But also, for example, you should share, because sharing is caring, right? We say these are the kind of things that can be questioned by a child, as opposed to those vague norms and ideas that they often don't question because they aren't direct commands or direct ideas, right? We say these are things that need to be taught early and cannot be learned by the child on their own. Why? Simply because habit forming is something that needs to be done over and over and over and over, right? Doing your homework, having discipline is simply something that you need to do over and over again. Realize how to eat healthily or whatever. Yeah, sure.
So if we don't make an effort to make children understand like long-term impacts of smoking, are they more or less like to rebel in the future and smoking like school toilets?
So this is kind of uncomparative, right? We already explained to you, children are likely to love their closing government basically gives us the analysis for our case. They say parents are likely to love their children. They're likely to have an emotional bond. They're right? Only in the cases where you're not able to do that, those are the cases where you need this fiat. You never actually explain why that's different, right? But we say these are the most important skills in life. And I think OG already sets up the metric which decides that our case will become debate winning. Because we explain to you that these kind of like soft skills that you learn are the things that give you success in school, right? The things that make you, for example, get the good grades, that make you be able to get into the colleges and further educate yourself and make you more critical thinking member of society. But second of all, it can be incredibly emotionally harmful when it turns out you are an adult and you never learned the kind of skills that you should have learned from your parents. For example, discipline, for example, healthy eating or emotional intelligence, sharing is caring, or being able to interact with others. But third of all, we say that it's just incredibly important for children to be able to learn these skills as early on as possible. If we give children any kind of counter-narrative that teaches them to question these direct commands, that is when it goes wrong. That is when they learn the wrong things. Vote closing.
Thank you very much for that, Emma. And now, call upon account to continue today's debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, as Lucy explains to you in her speech, a lot of the cases that we get out of this closing opposition extension are cases in which parents and teachers are obviously going to agree that there is an objectively correct thing to do. Things like doing your homework, eating your vegetables, sharing with other children. Parents or are the kinds of things that teachers often currently teach children to do, like accepting other people, like having a broader worldview, like accepting themselves even if it isn't the exact version that their parents want them to be. These are things that teachers often do and have the skills to tell children to do, but aren't currently empowered to say and insert that fiat that even if your parents are telling you something different, you are still special and important. I'm going to explain in further detail why that clashes with closing opposition, why it places in this debate, and secondly, explain or refute op. Okay, firstly, why our extension is the most relevant case in this debate. Firstly, because taught to a large extent in schools through history classes and other already do this but aren't empowered to do so. But secondly, loving their children, absolutely. Like not questioning their children, like wanting the best for their children. It's often those things that are most harmful to that child. We give you the reasons why schools are likely to do this well, which responds to opening opposition's challenges to the government bench when they talk to you. As in my Lucy already tells you that obviously teachers also and governments don't want kids to do these things, and it's unlikely that those are the most impactful cases. We say that these are the cases in which our extension is the against this system, and they're unlikely to have massive problems with it, and therefore you don't have those massively controlling parents lashing back. Secondly, they say at the house, teachers need to do this more. They need to tell, and that's a benefit on our side of the house. So designing curriculums that say that the values taught to you by your parents aren't necessarily correct. That just because your parents have an idea, it's not necessarily correct. But furthermore, because of like not wanting to question that authority, which is status quo, teachers often insert fiat surrounding, obviously you should just listen to your parents. Obviously your parents are correct, and feel pressure to do this. We lift that from teachers on our side of the house. No, thank you. Regarding what we get from closing opposition uniquely, they say, obviously I respond to the stuff about it not working because parents are controlling by telling you that parents don't mean to be controlling, and even just a marginal increase on our side of the house in kids being able to accept themselves, because like Lucy explains to you why parents and kids are likely to be different from each other, and that often causing a lot of self-conflict within people in not feeling like they're able to do what they want. That massively empowers people in the future of their lives, but doesn't necessarily have to involve parents actively being really controlling. But secondly, the second part of their extension surrounding social skills and following basic commands, Lucy as well already told you, and they didn't respond in their member speech, and we have no chance to respond again, that they're all things that teachers are still going to tell children to do, and therefore if at some point it's likely that you're not going to be able, it is necessary for you to be told you need to do your homework, and that is the action that is required in order for you to learn that skill. I'll take opening in a second. You still get that learning experience on our side of the house. Opening.
Parents don't use authority to suppress those gender identity, and such they condition their love and financial support, and are much likelier to be easy on the trigger when they fear losing you to the system tells you to undermine them.
Okay, well, as we already explained, this isn't our mechanisms are not based off of parents massively wanting huge amounts of control. They're just parents not having the skills or ability to do anything. In a POI, and they say, oh well, sex education is taught really badly, so those kind of cases we don't gain any benefit from. Firstly, in liberalising countries, and which is every country is gradually getting more liberal, it's massively improving. Secondly, we don't actually think that they're the most relevant cases, and they're not the cases in our extension either, because parents don't talk a huge amount with their kids about those kind of things. It's really awkward to talk about sex and drugs with your parents. They're much more likely to be told about those things in school anyway. But we think massively important, and this is exactly what your parents give to you at any point, is this kind of subtle messaging around values, around the way you treat other people, around the way you plan for your future, what you think is a good life. They're the kind of things that subtly, without even telling you, your parents are constantly teaching you, and you're never told to think any differently. For all those reasons, so proud to propose.
I think the government, called my yacht, here.